Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, members of the media. Welcome to the Grantley Adams International Airport. This afternoon, we are going to be addressed by Minister of Health and Wellness, the Honorable Jeffrey Bostic, and then Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley. We may also be facilitated by other members of the Cabinet. Minister?
Good afternoon, all. Thank you very much, Roy. I just want to give you a quick update from the COVID perspective, although I know we are now into ash fall times. I am happy to report today that we would have conducted 562 tests at the Best Dos Santos lab, of which 9 new positives have resulted, 3 male and 6 female, and that 8 persons will be released from isolation today. I continue to be really happy about the way things are going statistically and based on the work that we've been doing, and I really congratulate the entire country, citizens, residents, the press, and the many team members from the various parts of the frontline operations who have contributed to the continuous decline in our positivity rates. And I must say to you, though, that as happy as I am about that, I'm very cautious, because if there's one thing that I have learned from last year's experience at late December, is that these things can change within the twinkling of an eye. And they can change if we become complacent, if we rest on our laurels, if we drop our guard. If we do those things, in my view, what we're doing is feeding the pandemic, giving it strength, giving it oxygen. And that is something that we are not going to do. So that by saying that, let me also report that although we are very happy with how things are, I do believe that things could be better. Things could be better. But we have a couple situations that we are monitoring, we've been following over the last several days. And I would refer, first of all, to the cluster that we would have reported in the north of the country, a church cluster. That cluster is now at about 22, 23 positives, so over the last couple of weeks or so, and we would have had about 2 more today in the figures that I just gave you. The cluster comprises members of the church as well as family members and close associates. But we've also discovered that apart from that particular grouping, that this cluster has also impacted on about 3 other institutions, one to the tune of about another 10 positives, and then 1 each at the other 2 institutions. And so there are some linkages there. And I'm saying that to you and to the country just to remind us that we must continue to follow the protocols. I will say this as often as I think it necessary. The arrival of vaccines and the continuous decline in positivity rates, that is not an excuse for us to stop sanitizing, stop physical distancing, and to stop wearing masks. We must be very, very vigilant as we go forward so that we continue on the present trajectory and that we do not return to the last few months, which really, for me, have been a horrifying experience. So I just want to urge everyone to continue to cooperate, even in these difficult times with the impact of the ashfall. We still have, and especially now, I think people will realize the importance of wearing masks and sanitizing. So continue to do the right things, and I can assure you that we will continue to see the figures going down. We are on top of things at this point in time, but we are not going to become complacent. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Bostic. We will now hear from Prime Minister Motley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morris. Thank you, Minister Bostic, members of the media, persons to whom my voice is being reached, members of cabinet who are with me. First and foremost, let me continue to reinforce the words of Minister Bostic and to say, yes, how glad we are that generally things have been keeping low. They can be better, but we've come a long, long way from where we were. And I truly hope that we will recognize that it is important for us not to drop our guard at all. And the fact that this incident has happened where people remain stubborn and not want to cooperate or incline their hearts to wisdom causes us to be in a position where other institutions have been put at risk today, in my view, unnecessarily so. So that we really do need to continue to pull together. As the Minister has said, we cannot drop our guard with respect to the protocols. One of the only good thing about the dust is that it has everybody wearing masks now in Barbados, bar none, because of how awful this dust is, both in terms of our ability to breathe, but also with our eyes and our skin in terms of the irritation that it causes. And I therefore hope that we will continue in that trend, Minister. When we have more information, we've started back the vaccination program. Clearly it has been affected by the dust, the ashfall, but when we are in a position to receive more, we shall do so and continue that, because that continues to still be our primary battle as we go forward. Secondly, we are here at the airport because we came to do a site visit from Cabinet this morning. In fact, we curtailed Cabinet in order to be able to do what has to be done and to take the decisions that have to be taken. And why? Earlier this morning, I received a call from Professor Robertson, who has been, and I really want to thank him and the Seismic Research Center, Dr. Joseph, Stacey Edwards, I believe is the name of the other person, Wilfred. They have been working wonderfully well with the government of Barbados, and in particular the Ministry of Home Affairs and my office. We have been advised, as has the Met Office, immediately upon the eruptions. And what was very clear from Professor Robertson, there was another eruption this morning, but it was not of sufficient strength to send it high up into the atmosphere to allow it to come to Barbados, and therefore the ash would have gone west instead of moving east. And therefore we were not really affected by the eruption this morning, and we were minimally affected yesterday. But for sure, what they have said is that the regularity of eruptions has decreased and the strength of the eruptions has also weakened. And with those two things in hand, it means that we are in a position, we believe, to really ramp ahead now, full steam ahead with the cleanup operations. It is for this reason that we took the decision to leave Cabinet early, and rather than continue with the approach that we had been taking the last 2 days at the airport, which was essentially just to minimize the flow of dust. I was here on Monday, and Monday was far worse than what you see now, both in terms of inside the terminal and on the outside. But the bottom line was, as long as ash was falling, it is almost a self-defeating exercise. So to that extent, given the instructions and the advice coming from Professor Robertson, we have now decided to fully ramp up, full steam ahead, and that over the course of the next day or two, or however long it takes, we will have all of the major construction companies in Barbados on site, major civil works construction companies on site. The airport is being divided up into quadrants, as well as to be able to deal with inside as well as the canopies. We recognize that in dealing with the airport, as I've said over and over, you cannot just deal with the airport. You've got to create a zone around the airport because the wind is blowing the dust. So all from up at Gemswick coming down, you're going to have dust coming in. And to that extent, therefore, the Ministry of Agriculture has also been mobilized in order to be able to deal with the plowing of those fields and the wetting of those fields. We've also had the Ministry of Public Works and Maintenance, Public Works and Transport come with the Barbados Water Authority today, and the Water Authority has agreed that we can use non-potable water, both from the Bridgetown Sewage Treatment Plant, which we can chlorinate and ensure that it is treated coming up here, and we will be able to use some limited use of seawater, particularly on the land side. We cannot use it on the air side of the airport, but will allow us to be able to ensure that there are multiple approaches to keeping the dust down. And then, of course, you see even just the grass out there in the middle of the runway is full of dust, so that you've got to be able to deal with that. Now, we are thankful, and I want to thank Minister Cummins for ensuring that we have had the best support available, and ICAO and others have shared with us reports that have shown how other airports, and there haven't been many, but how other airports globally in Alaska, in Indonesia, in the Philippines, those countries that have had to deal with ashfall. Iceland was probably the one that most Barbadians may recall because it also affected British airspace. And we are looking and have reviewed comprehensively the fact that even in those previous ones, there was a trial approach, test and fix, because of the nature of the dust, because of the movement of the breezes, because of the nature of the terrain, so that each country still has to come up with its own. Now, why am I saying all of this? Our airport has to open back up as a matter of urgency. And Barbados has been cut off through air transport for the last 6 days. We can no longer continue with that. Mercifully, with the advice coming about the reduction in eruptions as well as the weakening of the eruptions, it means that we can start. Will we have the risk of more ash? Potentially. Because if a dome is created again and there is an explosion and it does go high enough up into the air, it can come to us. But their reading of the situation, and I would invite members of the media to speak to them directly, is just that in the middle of the day, they're obviously in the field and there's no access. Professor Robertson is in St. Vincent itself. But I invite you to speak to them. They believe that now is an appropriate time for us to feel that there is some limited respite. We would like it to be permanent respite, but we don't know. And therefore, we will have to continue monitoring. What is the other reason for that? My friends, whether we like it or not, Barbados is at risk always based on the structure of the Soufriere volcano and the manner in which it explodes, it operates. Barbados is at risk always of this kind of ashfall. And this was the advice equally coming from Professor Robertson to me this morning. Recognizing as well, too, that there are multiple issues that have not necessarily taken and commanded people's attention. For us who remember 1979 and Soufriere, bottom line was it was nowhere near as bad as this. And to that extent, I suspect that is why even in the emergency planning in this country, it has never been fully integrated. I am here now to tell you that we don't have that luxury anymore because of the work that they have done. They know specifically that the shape of the volcano, the structure of the volcano, and the manner in which it is likely to operate, Barbados will probably, Bridgetown will probably be more at risk than Kingstown many of the times for the eruption. What does that mean? Just as we've gotten in the drill every year to be able to prepare for hurricane seasons, to know what to do with floods, we have now to have as part of our psyche the preparation of monitoring anytime Soufriere is active, not for the volcanic explosion that the Vincentians regrettably have had to put up with. And my heart bleeds out to them because, for example, they've had no water for the majority of the last 5-6 days because of the manner in which the water supply has been affected. Okay, and the fact that they have to get to those areas in order to fix them. But we will equally not escape it. And to that extent, Barbados, from the airport, seaport, utility companies, government, everybody must have always prepared a volcanic ash plan. And I'm happy that the Minister of Home Affairs, Minister Abrams, has been reaching out to the International Volcano Hazard, what's the name of the organization? Health and Hazard. And they are experts dealing with volcanoes, from the health issues right back to the substantive issues of how we recover from this kind of ashfall. And to that extent, therefore, there is a body of learning that we have now to embrace in this country, both at the professional level, but equally at the level of households. And to that extent, therefore, we expect that that public education and public sensitization will continue. Where are we today with respect to the cleanup? As I told you on Sunday, we couldn't wait until the end to do everything. It was always going to be difficult to do the airport, because once you have a vast expanse such as this, Mr. Best, the Chief Met Officer, will tell you that you're going to suffer from drift, because it's just too open and too wide, and the breeze will carry it. Having said that, we were able to start work, and I want to thank Minister Goodinedgel and all of the officers in the Ministry of Public Works. Mr. Wason is here, and others who have been working. Believe you me, these people have been working day and night. Minister of Housing, similarly, William Duguid, who has taken the responsibility for all of government buildings with the exception of the schools and the health institutions, where we've contracted out directly because of the complexity of either dealing with them or the volume that is required with respect to the schools. To that extent, we have seen, and Bajans have been extraordinary. There's stories that will warm your heart. On the Tuesday morning, I think it was, when people started moving the dust off of the highway there by Sky Mall, one lady came up and went and to give the workers $20 just to say how grateful she was about the fact. She said, I can't get everything, but I want to give you all this little thing so you get something to eat. And of course, others put with it, and just as an expression of gratitude that these are persons who have put on the PPE and who, in the middle of the dust still blowing, are out there trying to make it more palatable and amenable and comfortable for the rest of us to be able to move around. Similarly, we have seen, and I moved around the country today, I've seen commercial enterprises starting to clean up around their buildings, starting to wash down buildings and clean buildings. We've seen it also start with the government. And to that extent, the instructions have been given with respect, and let me deal with them one by one. With respect to the government buildings, as I said, all government buildings, with the exception of schools and health institutions, will be under the control of the Ministry of Housing to have it cleaned up over the course of the next week to 2 weeks, because we recognize that there may be some need for deep cleaning beyond what is being done in the yards and that kind of thing, or the car parks. In addition, of course, to those government buildings, we have the housing estates, and the government housing estates where tens of thousands of people live, and the government still has responsibility for making sure that those housing estates are made clean as quickly as possible. And Minister Duguid has been given the authority to be able to bring on a few extra people in order to help in that exercise. Similarly, what has the dust done for us? It's not just the highways that have been affected, but it is all of the secondary roads. And therefore, we have to make sure that all 1,600 kilometers of roads in Barbados are properly cleaned. And why? On Sunday, you heard me talk about the drains and the sewers, and that the worst thing that could happen to us would be for us to have the ash solidify, cake up like cement, and go into the drains and the sewers, because we would pay the price, not now, we're going to pay the price in August and October and November when flooding comes as a result of heavy rainfalls. We also have, therefore, to make sure that all secondary roads in Barbados are properly cleaned. And that's why I said to those householders and residents who can clean around your house, help us to help you. But without prejudice to that, in every nook and cranny across every parish in this country, we will engage just about 1,500 persons to help us over the next 10 to 14 days clean, literally, the country. Now, they say you must never wish for things too much, and I have wished and publicly spoken about the need for a clean Barbados on the last few major addresses that I did at Independence. Well, we're going to get a clean Barbados, but by a different route. And regrettably, let us recognize that having to have had to come this route, let us keep it clean hereinafter. And I'm appealing to us. Why? Because we are less than 6 weeks from the start of the hurricane season. And the one thing we need to do is not only to rid drains and sewers of this ash, but all other things that can block it up and literally lead to flooding and destruction and damage to property and regrettably, hopefully never, but possibly loss of life. So over the course of the next 2 weeks, my friends, Barbados is one massive cleanup site. And I'm asking every Bajan, please, to play your part. Yes, these gentlemen and ladies can do what they have to do on behalf of your government. But I need every householder and every business to play their part. Ask not what the country is going to do for you alone, but tell us how you are going to help the country in this national effort. And by extension, that's why I've chosen to speak to you at the airport, because the airport now represents a collective approach to resolving this problem in the shortest possible time. How many times have I said many hands make light work? And therefore, we have called all of the major contractors in the country, civil works contractors, all of the companies that have the trucks to be able to move the water from either the Bridgetown sewage treatment plant or from Oistins by the sea in order to be able to allow us to do what we have to do. Clearly, we're not using salt water on the air side, so nobody don't get worried and don't ask me that question about that. Salt water is only on the land side. But the need for the volume of water is such that we cannot rely only on potable water without compromising people's access to water in this country, which has already been constrained by the higher than normal usage over the course of the last 5 days, with people taking their own actions, obviously, to try and make sure that where they live is at least livable. And therefore, not just in Barbados, but in the same reports that ICAO shared with us, there was also a reduction in water available to airports during the cleanup because of the fact that the extraordinary usage in the areas in which they had been suffering from ash led to a reduction in water available to the airport and to the average citizen. Barbados, my friends, is no different. And therefore, I ask us to please conserve water, ensure that all the things that we know, don't leave the tap on when you're brushing your teeth, don't leave and have long showers, don't do, and as I said, yes, everybody would love 2 and 3 showers a day, especially with this dust, but I'm asking us please to remember that while you may have water home at you, others don't have water home at them. And if we don't become our brothers and sisters' keeper, then all of us will suffer as a result. And we've already known how critical access to water is at this stage. As it relates to the airport, I believe that with the absence of the ash, that we can get planes going again so long as we can get here going. But this has to be continuous work for the next 24, 48, 72 hours, however long it takes. And in some countries, may I remind you, it took a much longer period of time. You are free. In fact, I will ask Minister Cummins to share the report with the members of the media, because I think that there is merit in persons reviewing and seeing that this is a complex exercise, but it is not one that is beyond us. From here on in, Barbados clearly has to have a volcano ash plan for all of these institutions. As it relates to the Bridgetown port, yesterday they started to deliver perishables out to people because obviously they could do nothing. I think anybody who saw the pictures of the airport, the seaport, and the hospital would have sworn that they were seeing pictures from the 1930s if they didn't see the buildings and the towers that looked like the Great Depression in the United States of America, with all of the attendant problems with the kind of dust bowl that we had. Mercifully, the port has done a great deal to clean up. It still has work to do, Minister Humphrey, but bottom line is they've been cleaning all through the night and all through the day. And we were able, as I said, to give out the perishables yesterday, and I believe sheds 2 and 4 should have opened today in order to be able to start delivering personal effects to people once more. We know already, and we would have had them in the press conference on Sunday, the Water Authority, the Light and Power Company, and the other utility companies are all taking their own preemptive and corrective actions to deal with this. You only need to drive up and down Barbados. I just drove on the south coast coming up here, coming from Cabinet. And I don't even know how to explain it. I really don't know how to explain it. This country has been hit. In our language, we would say it is a disaster. Minister Cadell and others, Minister Ford will tell me whether it meets the triggering of that at a different level. But none of us have ever seen this country covered in dust like this. And you better understand why I played the Kamau Brathwaite poem that captured socioculturally what happened in 1902, because clearly the dust falls were periodic and spasmodic then too, and literally covered the whole country and also badly affected livestock, plants, etc. I've asked the Ministry of Agriculture as well to have a public education program for the farmers, to continue to let them to know how to treat to what they're doing. Just because somebody hears it once doesn't mean they're going to remember it. So that both the media and the social media need to be utilized in order to get the message across. I've also asked Minister Bostic, the public health persons, to start the process of being able to track where this damage is going to potentially affect us from a public health perspective and an individual health perspective, and to, if necessary, particularly for those who are working on the, helping us clean up, to make sure that they are given the appropriate tests and any medical support that they needed in order to be able to help the country get through this difficult moment. I also want to report, Minister Abrams, that you have settled with the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology to start the measurement of the ash across the country. And we are going to have to be able to do that if we are going to be able to see how we have truly been affected and what we can do. And finally, I've asked equally that the Coastal Zone Unit, working with the other environmental entities, help us to determine what is going to be the impact on our coral reefs. Because in the same way, and go and look at it home by you or around near by you, when the ash comes down, it's almost like if the soil under the ash can't breathe. Now, if you imagine that on the reefs, and imagine the fact that it also creates a darkness over the reefs that can lead to the bleaching of the reefs. And I'm not a scientist, but I know enough to know that this is bad for the reefs. So that from roofs to reefs, regrettably, while that may be our overall plan that we had come to government to do and to deal with over the next 10 years as a country in order to transition us, this event has shown us the true measure of how vulnerable we are from roofs to reefs, regrettably. And not this time from a hurricane, not this time from a flood, not this time from sargassum that we are all affected by, not this time from a groundwater crisis, which we continue to be affected by, but this time by another natural disaster triggered initially by earthquakes. We had a undersea earthquake off Barbados, 130 kilometers off Barbados, 2 or 3 days before Soufriere erupted. And these things, I'm told, are all interconnected, because you can have earthquakes that are literally related to volcanoes, just as you can have earthquakes related to tectonic, shift of tectonic plates. So my friends, this is an update. This is an entreaty to the public of Barbados, to all of you. Please, as you go about cleaning your own houses, don't douse it with water. Minister Walcott reminded me this morning that we have a habit in this country of sprinkling before you start to sweep. Sprinkle so that the dust does not keep blowing up in your face. But as you do that, also find the opportunity to conserve water in your daily usage personally and your household usage until we can get out of this. I've also given instructions for additional equipment to be purchased with respect to accessing water, because we are potentially at a stage where that increased demand for water can become problematic further nationally. And we cannot at all allow that situation to continue. But I need the public's cooperation with respect to this. As it relates to what government must do, over the next 14 days, government is full steam ahead on all of the cleaning of the buildings, the roads, secondary roads. The beaches have more or less started to clean themselves, and for that we are grateful, with the tides moving in and out. But on the other parts, it's up to us. We will do our part, but I need every Bajan to do theirs too. Are there any questions for the ministers or myself before I go off? There is a CARICOM Heads of Government meeting that is starting in 30 seconds, but and it is to deal with the update from Soufriere. And clearly, Barbados has also been a victim of Soufriere. So I will have to go shortly, but we'll take a few questions, or the other ministers can take as well if I have to run, because I'm going to do the meeting in the lounge.
I have a question related to agriculture. I spoke with someone this morning from St. Vincent, and they said that we can expect a decrease in the number of amount of produce to come to Barbados. Can we hear from Barbados's end in terms of the products that we depend on to get from St. Vincent? How that would be impacted?
I don't need the chief agricultural officer to tell me that. You only need to be a Bajan and see when the fruits come in, and when the vegetables come in, when the avocado comes, when the mangoes come. Sometimes there's even some breadfruit and all, dasheen, all kinds of things. And there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to be hit both at the level of the household, but also at the level of those people who normally trade coming out of St. Vincent. And there are a number of them I know that go all around the island, selling produce. By the same token, we have also to do our own assessment to see how this ash is going to affect our own crops and our own livestock. And that's why getting the airport and the seaport fully functional again is absolutely critical, so that we will have food coming in and will not in any way be suffering for a lack of food as a result of what has happened both in St. Vincent and Barbados. Okay?
Prime Minister, good afternoon. Barry Allen from the Nation here.
Good to see you, my brother.
Good to see you. Most of today we've heard a litany of complaints from scores of Barbadians, most of them in rural Barbados, speaking about a calamity of not having access to basic potable water. As you mentioned earlier, you know of it. They're complaining about having not taken baths from last weekend, tankers not coming, or they're not having access to tankers. I mean, and we've heard from the General Manager of the Barbados Water Authority, but as Prime Minister, what is your message to these people? Can you give them a message of hope?
That I've just told the people that I don't care with and how to do it, that if you're going to buy second-hand trucks, go and buy some. You understand? And get some potable water trucks in. Minister Goodenedgel has already spoken to the chairman of the board of the Water Authority and the general manager. Bottom line is that we do have another 9 or 10 trucks that were ordered. They're not due to come because they're new until June. But I can't wait and go and tell nobody in the country to wait till June. So that the first thing I've done is tell them go and find some second-hand trucks and get them in here. But secondly, that I want to talk now as mayor, not as prime minister. There are very few people in this country that don't know people. And regrettably, we're going to have to open up our arms, our hearts to persons. Mercifully, we do not have the level of evacuation that the people of St. Vincent have to deal with. But we do have discomfort for too many of our citizens, particularly as a result of the increased use of water that is necessary in order to maintain both the public health and the environmental, the kind of environment that we need in order for people to live properly. So that there is an extraordinarily higher level of demand on water this week than there was 2 weeks ago. If we had problems 2 weeks ago, it is now compounded. And that is why I've said find the second-hand trucks wherever possible. But I want to say to Bajans, people who got family, let them come by you or stay by you, and let us work out that for the next week or two. It can be difficult. And this is not the first difficult time that this country has had to go through. That's why I go back to the Camel poem. That's why I go back to the times of the World War. That's why I go back to the fact that our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents had to live a life that was different. And until we can resolve it, we know that, for example, and let me deal with some of them. I saw that somebody came out asking why you only have a 3-inch main in Bagatelle and Qulan, and that by simply changing the main, things are going to change. The main needs to change, but that's not going to solve the problem of Bagatelle and Qulan until we bring water from St. Stephen's Hill and Lodge Hill right up there, and we're in the process of doing that. St. Joseph and St. John have to be dealt with by way of Vineyard, as you know, and that is almost finished, Minister. How much longer? Let's say about a month or so away from the physical work, civil works being completed. We have the temporary desal plant. We've had to shut down the Hope desal plant temporarily this week, but we have the other temporary one that's supposed to be going at Colleton and one at Maynard's. Or Mullins. I'm not sure if it's one of the M's in St. Peter. I can't remember which one offhand. But the point is that all of those things are happening. And I have no doubt that just as people don't really complain about garbage trucks no more, and we put that behind us, we are going to reach a point where people don't complain about access to water, but we are not yet there. And it hurts my heart, it pains my heart that we're not yet there. As it relates to those households, I've said to the Water Authority and to the Minister, let me see the districts, because I now want a daily report to make sure that with this increased usage that we are in a position to help these persons with basic needs. And that's why you heard me earlier talk and appeal to Bajans. Save the water. Be sparing with it.
And a quick follow-up question, Minister. Have you been given a most recent update regarding our reservoir levels or groundwater levels?
Not in specific terms, and I hope to get that soon. But more than that, I've given an instruction before I came here this afternoon for there also to be testing to make sure that there's no negative impact as a result of the ash in any way. And that may not be immediately available to us now because of how water moves through at the groundwater level, but I've said that we have to start monitoring it, because if there is a problem, then we need to face it and fix it. If there is not a problem, then we need to give thanks and move to the next issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move?
Good afternoon, Prime Minister Wendy Burt, Starcom
Good to see you
Network.
too,
You spoke to 1,500 bodies coming to help with the work. Can you tell me if this is new temporary employment we're going to be creating, or if you're pulling
It's
persons
just
from
temporary.
different departments?
I expect this to finish within 2 weeks. But the bottom line is Barbados has 1,600 kilometers of road. If we take out the highways, just for argument's sake, suppose we were left with, you take out highways 1 to 7, ABC and Spring Garden, you're left roughly with 1,500 kilometers. You develop and have literally 750 teams of 2 doing 2 kilometers each. That 2 kilometers will be done hopefully within 7 to 10 days, but I put in an extra 4 days because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if you're going to have more dust. I don't know if you're going to have rain. I don't know if you're going to have what. So that is the contingency planning that they've done. And what this is just mobilizing people from the community and saying, look, come, everybody doing ABC Highway. Everybody doing Highway 1 and Highway 2. Nobody in doing 1st Avenue, Alliance Land, 2nd Avenue, Alliance Land, Bush Hall, Yard Gap. Nobody in doing New Orleans. Nobody in doing Tweedside Road. Nobody in doing out in Carino Village side. Nobody in up in St. Joseph, up in Parks. Nobody in doing none of them things. So we need literally to have 750 teams. And one of the constraining factors why we started with the highways and not the secondary roads is that they can't go and do it without tools. So that the next thing that we had to look for the last 2 days was to see whether we had sufficient tools, brooms, shovels, etc., to be able to deploy to give everybody. We're now in a position, I think they started taking delivery both at Public Works and at Housing with those implements. And therefore, I expect that by tomorrow you will start seeing people, if they haven't started in some instances already this evening.
Okay, thank you, Prime
All right, but it's
Minister.
temporary work. But having said that, if the volcano erupt again, the same men and women they have to come back again and do it again. But the systems that we're putting in place, and let me say, look, this country has been independent for 55 years, effectively, later this year. That we don't have databases that tell us the length of roads, that tell us how many people live on each road, that we don't have things in manageable format. All of that is what this government has had to come to terms and deal with and create from scratch. And I pray I pray that no future government and no future leader has to go through what we have had to go through by building up systems from ground zero in order to deal with all of these different crises, from the pandemic right back through to this. Distribution of food nationally has to be always a tool available to a government in the event of a hurricane. Fixing and cleaning up nationally has to be always available. And of course, yes, we were affected, but that didn't stop us from sending to St. Vincent last week on the Coast Guard what we know they need, but recognizing that we're going to have to modify some of how we're doing and how we live. Life isn't always sunny. As we learned, it's very hazy for a while. So let's get on with it.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you.
My next question quickly is for Minister Bostic.
Jeffrey? Sorry.
Just today, we heard the Pan American Health Director speak to the issue of complacency since people have been getting vaccines. What I want to find out from you is, one, have we been seeing any of those patterns? And secondly, how are we going to try to mitigate against it, especially since we've slackened some of our restrictions?
Okay. No, we have not necessarily been seeing those tendencies. When I spoke earlier, I was simply making the point that we must not do that. There are some other things that we've been seeing which have nothing to do with the vaccines. But generally speaking, I have to say that we could not have reached where we are at this point in time unless we had the cooperation of the vast majority of Barbadians and persons who reside in Barbados. And that's a fact. And that is what we must continue to do. But the thing about complacency is real. It is very, very real. And only this morning, one of my doctors shared, public health doctors shared an article with me, I believe out of Israel, which was suggesting that when you're coming near to the end, as we are of certainly the last outbreak that we've had, that people may start to smile and relax and feel that it is all over. And that is something that I'm urging all of us, including myself and all those who work with me, to ensure that we do not do that. We have to treat this thing until the very end, the same way that we've been fighting it all along.
I've just received a note that Shed 4 is open for the delivery of fruit and goods going to St. Vincent, but Shed 2 is not yet fully open. They opened it up this morning, but the level of dust coming in was still too much for the workers to be able to work, and they therefore had to shut it down again and will be subjected to further cleaning later this evening again. I also want to say that Minister Walker, as I leave, has been working assiduously, speaking to a number of friendly nations who are prepared to work with us to help us treat to these issues, both in terms of technical assistance and more substantive assistance where necessary, probably equipment as well. And in addition to that, the ministry therefore expects that it will continue to work with our friends globally to see how best they can assist us at this most difficult time. I will end on this point. The most important thing is to keep your heads above water. And I know that while COVID has been rough for the last year, there are a lot of people for whom this ash really was like the straw that broke the camel back. I'm begging you, don't let it break your back. We are stronger than this. And yes, you've heard me say it already, we got this, we got this. Believe you me. And that is why you see everybody up here. The number of trucks that have come since we've been here this afternoon, literally, we've had the meetings less than an hour ago with the contractors, and we've seen increased trucks being moved from elsewhere and being deployed. To the residents of the surrounding areas, we know that you are particularly affected by this dust. And therefore, I've told and given instructions that whatever we do in the airport, we're going to try and do to make sure that we keep the dust down for those of you living on the below side of the airport and who are subject to it obviously coming around. This is not a one-off exercise. Even when planes come again, we're not going to get all of the dust one time, and the propulsion from the planes is likely to lift up and suspend dust again. So we're going to be in this for a little bit, but we can get back to normal, some level of normalcy. We can live, but we do need people to keep their mask on. We do need people to help clean around where they live and to help us clean as much as possible while we do what we have to do. But above all else, we need you to keep your spirits high and to recognize that this ashfall, like COVID, cannot break us, and that we as a nation will continue to move to where we need to go stronger and recognizing more than ever what we have as weaknesses and strengths and being prepared to fix those weaknesses, but also to execute those strengths in the favor of not just yourself, your family, but I ask you, your country. Thank you and God bless.